It's AM 1160, WCCS 101.1 FM. There's an old image. So I can't remember who the comedian was. I think maybe Steve Martin years ago when Richard Nixon had resigned the presidency, and Steve Martin talked about Nixon with nothing left to do, so he's just walking along the beach there in San Clemente with his metal detector. I don't think Greg Brown's reached that stage yet, but let's find out and say good morning to Pirates broadcaster Greg Brown. Good morning.
Good morning. I was reading a recent quote, I think it was by Rogers Hornsby, the Hall of Famer, who was asked about what he does during the offseason. He says, I stare out the window every day for 6 months until baseball season returns. I think that's the image I have of myself. Not quite to that point, but it is tough not to be broadcasting some playoff baseball, though, that's for sure.
It is jarring to you, isn't it, when the season just comes to an end, boom, like that?
It's people often ask me about what this job is like, and we're kind of reverse of, and I don't mean to associate a broadcaster to a teacher because they are way more important than what we do. But in terms of the lifestyle, teachers, work winters and have a few months off in the summers. We work in the summers and have the months off in the winters. And once the season begins, for us, it's like the middle of February until, unfortunately, this year, it was October 2nd. It's pretty much full throttle, and you're on. You mentioned Steve Martin. You're kind of performing. Like anybody hosting talk shows, sports shows, whatever it might be in the entertainment business. That's what it is. So you're on every single day for the most part with a handful of off days. And it's like riding a wave. And when the season ends, you've reached land. You've hit the beach. And you're walking around. You're getting your sea legs under you. And you're trying to figure out where you are. And you take a deep breath. And then you regroup. You find out, okay, now I know where I am. This is my house. This is my family, my kids, my dog. And this is all the stuff that I put off from the middle of February in the corner, the magazines, the books, the to-do list. It just is bizarre. It's like living two separate lives.
Yeah, that list of projects must just be something to look at. You probably want to turn your head away from that and curse the Pirates even more for not getting into the playoffs this year.
Absolutely, that's the truth.
Hey, Greg, let's go back to last season. And, it was a team that hovered around the 500 mark and then had a couple of big losing streaks that knocked them out of contention. At what point during this past season did you say to yourself, this team just doesn't have what it takes to get to where we want to go?
Man, that's a tremendous question because, there's just something about a baseball team, and you never want to admit it. So, and I'm no sage, but it's pretty early in a year, for me, in the back of my mind, when a team's got it. And it was pretty early this year that I felt that this team just did not have it. You never concede. You're always thinking, okay, they'll catch fire, something will happen. But it's like when a team has a winning season, there are more big moments. There are more come-from-behind victories. There are more great diving plays. There are more big strikeouts and big moments. And as the season progresses, if you don't have a lot of those, even in April, in May, it's not happening. It's almost like I could go back and count. People have over the years been very kind about me and my style, and they've talked about how exciting and all that. Well, I almost don't know what to admit to them that the reason I have been an exciting announcer has been for the most part because the team is exciting. Mm-hmm. I never, when the team had the 3 playoff years, straight seasons, 13, 14, 15, I can't tell you how many people came up to me and said, man, you are the greatest. I've never heard you sound so good. Yeah. Well, 1 + 1 = 2. It's because they were winning. And so it's like you could count the number of exciting calls in a year that determines whether a team's a playoff team. And really felt in the back of my mind early on that last year's team didn't have it. Again, not to concede anything. You felt like, okay, at some point, maybe that'll start. They'll come from behind wins, the walk-off victories. There were a handful of them, but not enough.
Yeah, and one of the things that fans knew pretty early was that the Pirates had determined that they really weren't going to make moves, for instance, to replace Gung. They felt that the Freeze would be able to handle that. And I don't think they really expected that Gung would be a part of the mix. And to me, the most disappointing aspect of the entire season was the supposed best outfield in baseball, and what they play together, 25, 26 games. You just can't put together. A team like Pittsburgh, in a market like Pittsburgh, can't recover from those things like that unless they make some pretty bold moves.
Yeah, and I would even contest that anyone that would suggest that any team could lose their top arguably two players from the previous year, Jung Ho Gung and Starling Marte, for any length of time. Almost any team would suffer dramatically. It would be very difficult for the top market clubs to replace two of the best. And now Andrew McCutchen ended up having a rebound season, but I'm talking about going into this year. The season was sabotaged when Gung had that third DUI and Marte got caught for cheating, 80 games. So they were behind the eight ball from the get-go. I think the Pirates learned their lesson with the Gung situation. I really believe in my heart of hearts that the reason they did not go out and try and get another third baseman, this does, I guess, play to the idea that they're a small market team, small revenue club, and they can't go out and spend willy-nilly. But when they lost Gung, or when they knew Gung wasn't going to be around early in spring training, I think they thought there were reports that he could be done for the year, but the Pirates nobody knew that. It was all up to the United States government whether they're going to issue, and still is, the work visa. And so that nobody knew what the United States was going to rule, including the Pirates. Mm-hmm. So the Pirates probably felt like, okay, well, we'll bite the bullet here, and David Freese will fill in until Gung gets that work visa and gets in here. And then 1 week led to two, 1 month led to 2 months, and before you know it, it's a whole season. Having talked to Neil Huntington toward the end of the year on one of his radio shows, he was pretty emphatic that will not happen again this year, that if there is a chance, I'm talking about 2018, if there's a chance that there is a third baseman that teams are willing to trade, and that's a big issue, a starting third baseman who's got some pop. There are not many out there, like a Gung, but if there were a player out there that they could acquire, they will not be held up thinking that Gung might come back. They'll just go out and make the deal. Again, that's all depending upon whether that player is available. Yeah. So those are two big players to be lost for all intents and purposes. Certainly half the year with Marte and the whole year for Gung. And you're right. It's really difficult to recover from that.
Hey, you look forward then to 2018, and the Jung Ho Gung situation is certainly one that I think they're going to have to resolve pretty early. Also, of course, you've got guys like Garrett Cole coming up for arbitration. They've only, I think, 4 arbitration-eligible players, but Garrett Cole's the big one. And it just seems to me as if Garrett Cole is not really inclined to sign something long-term with the Pirates. So they've got a big decision with him. They've got a tremendous decision to make with Andrew McCutchen, and is there really market value for an Andrew McCutchen out there? They've got a lot of decisions to make, don't they?
Absolutely, and I think we will know fairly early as to what direction the 2018 club is going to go. We'll have an idea as to what moves are made or not made, and those are two of the biggest ones you just mentioned. I think, Cole, not only is he arbitration eligible, and you're right. I mean, from day one, when Scott Boras is the player's agent, you're not going to. A team like the Pirates isn't going to. It's so rare that any player represented by Scott Boras, the super agent, stays with a club through his potential free agent years. You can name on one hand easily the players that have stayed, including Steven Strasburg, who, by the way, I mean, it is unbelievable. Not to get off the track here, but it announced that Steven Strasburg, the ace of the Washington Nationals, they got a break yesterday, because the game was rained out between the Cubs and the Nats. Dusty Baker, the manager of the Nationals, figures for sure he'll then be able to turn around and use Strasburg, who gets the regular rest necessary. Mm-hmm. And Strasburg said last night that he doesn't feel well and he's not pitching tonight. It is unbelievable. And this goes back to the Nationals not potentially winning the World Series 5 years ago when Strasburg was shut down. A lot of people believe it was not Strasburg, that it's Boras, who's the guy that's pulling the strings. So that's an editorial for another day, but it does play into the question of Garrett Cole as to whether he will be. I don't see any way in the world that he's going to be with the team long term, nor did I think that when they drafted him, because Boras is his representative. But Cole offers the Pirates a huge bargaining chip, and they're at a crossroads because they could offer him arbitration, big money, not free agent money yet, but for a couple more years go that route, and hopefully he pitches like he did last year, healthy. Maybe gets back to his 19-win performance from a couple of years ago, or they could say, "Listen, we might not win in 2018. We might be a year or two away. Are we smarter by trading him and getting some big-time prospects in return?" I'm talking about Major League ready type players who are still young. Or are we going to go ahead and pay him a few more millions of dollars, and let him play for a team that might not win? And the other one, as you said, is McCutchen. I'm leaning toward the idea that they're not going to not pick up his option. I think he'll be with the team most of, if not all of next year. But those are two big questions. I think we'll find out early once the World Series ends, when those decisions have to be made with picking up player options and determining whether a player's going to be arbitration eligible, or right after the World Series when a lot of trades start to happen. I think we'll know the direction of the 2018 club.
Yeah, we really will. And one of the things that plays into it all is the idea that when you had those three straight playoff teams, fans turned out, great feelings around it, built up some goodwill, and it seems as if they burn up a lot of that goodwill here in the last couple of years. The Nicasio thing was like, man, that was just like the year before with the Liriano trade, and that goodwill just might be burned up. They have to win some fans back, and they have to somehow walk a balance between putting a ball club that's competitive on the field next year and also looking at the future. I know it's not easy, but they've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the first of all, the Liriano thing, I think they spun it wrong. I think they tried to spin it like, it was but they got the money for the most part off the books. They acquired a guy they thought could be a swing starter in Drew Hutchison, because he was the opening day pitcher for the Blue Jays the year before. The Blue Jays had high hopes for Drew Hutchison. The Pirates didn't think Hutchison would be an ace. They thought he would be a starter or a long reliever, and they figured they'd get something for Liriano, who they saw was the National League had figured him out. And so in addition to that, they dealt away two marginal at best prospects. We have found out a lot since then over time, and that's what it takes. There's the initial trade that's made, and there's the hand-wringing, there's the fans sounding off, upset at the Pirates. But then you take a long look back, and you see, well, wait a minute. Liriano was done. And the Blue Jays found that out. He had a couple of good games with the Blue Jays, but eventually they sent him off to the Astros. And the two players that they sent in that deal have not done much at all in the minor leagues with Toronto. They are very marginal prospects, and they never sniff the big league. So that might be a wash, because Hutchison ends up doing nothing for the Pirates, admittedly. In terms of the Nicasio thing, I also thought that the Pirates, I thought they were trying to be too PR savvy with that. For me, if you're out of the race and you can save, I don't care if you're the Pirates or the San Francisco Giants, by the way, who ended up doing the same exact thing with George Contos. Mm-hmm. They saved $300,000, and the Pirates picked up Contos. If you can save $600,000, why? I don't care if you're Bob Nutting, Jerry Jones, the richest man, Steve Forbes. Why wouldn't you do it? And the Pirates could do that by go ahead and sending Nicasio. I don't care where he goes. They were concerned, though, from a PR standpoint, that if he went to, say, the Chicago Cubs and they saved $600,000, the backlash would have been even worse from the fan base. And I think it kind of backfired, to be very, very honest with you.
Yeah.
I think they should have just let him go, try to make a deal. If the Cubs say, no, we're going to give you a marginal prospect, which the Phillies ended up getting, a very marginal prospect when they traded Nicasio to the Cardinals, then so be it. But heck, if you can save $600,000, save $600,000. You're out of the race. Nicasio's not coming back next year. The same is true if they could have done the same thing with John Jaso or any other player that was not returning. Chris Stewart, Wade LeBlanc. I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to do the same thing with those players just to get the money off the books. To me, that makes perfect business sense.
Greg Brown has been with us here this morning. We're going right up to the marker. Greg, by the way, I think Contos is going to be a tremendous pickup in the end of it.
I agree.
Hey, go clean the gutters or something, will you? You've got a lot of work to do, and thanks for being with us this morning.
I'm going to go stare out the window.
There you
Thanks
go.
a million.
Good plan.
Okay.
See you, Greg.